Hi, I'm Josh from Kemble, and this is my Vloggins, and I am heading to work where I work as a full-time art director. That's when I do these vlogs, is when I'm on my way to work in a creative department. And when I'm not art directing, I am busy doing freelance graphic designs or illustrations, which I've done professionally for over 15 years. When I'm not doing that, I am working on cartooning and comics, along with being a dad. So that's basically what I'm doing. I'm really excited because I have a book called Jacob's Apartment, which is my graphic novel about two characters, Jacob and Sarah, and how they are slightly polar opposites, but are drawn together in a common bond, in a love and dream of literature. It juxtaposes dreams versus reality, both dreams like your goals in life and dreams like physical dreams manifesting. It is a story that talks about love, loss, struggling with death of a family member, rectifying dreams versus reality, early love, and it definitely talks about young love. It's like a slice of life story. It's a coming of age story, and it primarily deals with the question of the idea that some questions can shake your faith, even the strongest faith. And so that is, in a nutshell, my first attempt at saying a pitch line. I will work on it. But it's a really good book. It's a graphic novel that's 136 pages plus. That's coming out from Graphic Mundi in May of 2022, and I'm really excited about it. It was actually my first graphic novel. It will be my second published graphic novel, and I'm just really excited to share it with the world. It deals with heavy topics, it's slice of life. This one's fictional, and unlike my other graphic novel, which is 2 stories, which is available now, and you can get at Amazon for a reduced rate. If you're going to pre-order Jacob's Apartment, I definitely ask that you do it through the link, through your local comic book shop. Just ask them to carry Jacob's Apartment, or your local bookstore, and it should be available wherever books are sold, and that goes all the way to your big, from your small mom and pop indie bookstore, which I always recommend go through your local indie bookstore or local comic shop, your LCS. But if you don't have one in your area, it should also, in theory, be available at Barnes & Noble. So ask your local Barnes & Noble or big box chain store to carry Jacob's Apartment, and let's get this thing on the shelves. So yeah, so that's something I'm really excited about announcing. I was able to announce it I think yesterday was the first day I was able to publicly talk about Jacob's Apartment. I'm still waiting on approval for the trailer. I have a book trailer that I'm going to be dropping hopefully sometime this week, which I'm really excited about. I did a podcast interview yesterday that I should be linking to at some point in the next 2 weeks or so. And then I'm just basically treading water, just plugging out pages. And it looks like we're getting further on closing potentially another deal for a different book that I can't talk about yet. But that will be much later down the line for when that would come out. So I'm pretty swamped. I'm trying to get I'm trying to get 2 stories, book 2, completed, and of course that's going to be a long haul project because 2 stories is hand lettered, hand inked. It's a very personal story about faith and mental illness, and the first one took years to make. This next one I'm trying to kind of make in a much shorter amount of time, which means a lot more just like hitting the table, no excuses. Let's get this thing knocked out. So that being said, I am just swamped. Like I am getting home, I'm like maybe taking a very brief power nap, and then I'm hitting the drawing board. And when I'm doing things like promoting a book too, that's like a little hard to juggle with also doing the comic with a renewed sense of urgency, because of the fact that I really want to get this out. I also really want to do it well. So again, because I won't take like shortcuts that are going to cause the work to suffer, it's just going to be what it is. Like, it's just a very busy season of life, and that's a good problem to have. So yeah, so I'm thinking about that. I'm really excited about that. I'm trying to think of other positive things in news. I did share the original inks for the Jacob's apartment cover, which on my Instagram and Facebook. So if you aren't following me there, make sure you follow me, because that should be really cool to see. And I'm starting to see a little bit of media talk about the book, so that's really exciting. Hopefully reviews start coming in. I'm really eager to kind of see what people think of this book. It's interesting when you've lived with a book, and that's kind of the topic that I was going to bring up. When you're a cartoonist and you're working on these things at the table, I know I have a lot of artist followers on YouTube who are also working on their own personal projects. How do you guys rectify all of this time kind of spent in isolation with a story? Even if you're like me and you have an editor, or you have people that you use to edit the book, and I luckily have 2 or 3 really hugely trusted sources that I vet and edit my scripts through before it even goes to an editor. And then I have editorial feedback as well. So it's like there's different iterations of the story, and you are getting some feedback from people. But there is this thing that happens, especially working on graphic novels, because of the length of these things and the time-consuming nature of creating them, where you're kind of sitting with your art on your own for quite a while. And it's interesting releasing a book like Jacob's that I've literally had, kind of brewing and concocting for years. And it's been kind of like having a stew that you've been unable to have other people try out. And then also being able to add a little spice to the stew, right? Like my editor, Kendra, had some amazing suggestions that I felt just tied off. I had a couple loose threads in the storyline that never quite, I hadn't quite figured out a way to resolve. She had a few suggestions that I think like bring the work to a whole different level, and I'm really excited to share with the world. But I'm also like full of anticipation to hear feedback of what people think of the book, and it's also kind of surreal. It's surreal putting out something that you spent years working on. And there's something very strange and unique, and I think amazing about the comics process. I guess maybe the weight isn't particularly unique to comics, but it's like there's something fascinating about kind of sitting on a piece of art that you can't show anyone, or that you can show a minimal amount of people. And this curiosity comes up throughout the whole process. I'm considering that as I'm working on 2 Stories book 2 as well. There's this like kind of weird zone that I find that I have to get myself in. On one hand, I need to be making the work as good as possible, and I can't be considering the audience too much, because if I pander or take shortcuts that I think are only for audience pleasing, but don't make me personally feel like I'm making quality work, that just doesn't feel right. And that's not the kind of book I want to make. I'm not really making comics to make a massive amount of money, although honestly, if that's a byproduct, I'd be really happy. But the kind of comics I'm doing, like slice of life, independent, auto-bio comics, by their nature, I feel like because it's such a long game and there are such long odds against any comic ever being very successful, I feel like I need to make it worth my while if I'm going to invest years of my life into making art. That and I have a day job like art direction that's covering those base needs financially. Then what I need to do is really swing for the fences when it comes to like the delivery of my own personal projects. And then if I swing for the fences and it doesn't hit, at least I know I gave my best effort, and I can be confident in the fact that like what I'm doing is worthwhile artistically, whether or not it's like commercially viable. So there's this weird thing where you can't, at least to me, I don't think you can think too much about your audience, because you might get psyched out and pander too much. But you also need to find this sweet spot between not thinking too much about your audience, but also not forgetting your audience, and not forgetting that you're doing your artwork to me, I'm not doing comics to just read on my own or show to family members. I'm doing comics that I want a complete stranger to be able to read, take away from it what I'm hoping they take away from it, designing it in a way where they'll appreciate it, where they'll get emotionally moved by my stories, and designing it in a way where if some random person who's into literature goes to a bookstore across the country that I've never met and pick up my work, that they can feel like their money was well spent. I don't know if that makes sense. So for me, that's a weird sweet spot, finding that area where you are considering your audience. You definitely want to consider your audience. You want to realize you're writing for more than just yourself. You're writing for other people. That helps a lot, especially like Jacob's Apartment is semi-autobiographical. Two Stories and Two Stories Book 2, which I'm in the middle of making Book 2, is full out, just full blown confessional autobio. And because of that, like, you can hit a lot of different pitfalls in writing if you get too isolated and too self-aggrandizing with it, too masturbatory with it. You definitely, at least to me, I'm not aiming to make comics just to please myself. I'm also not aiming to make comics just to enjoy the comic myself. My goal is to try to make pieces of art that are accessible and interesting and tell stories for other people to digest and read. Whether they're really hard subjects, whether I'm aiming for like some high artistic goal, still at the end of the day, I'm making it for readers, and I need to remember that, and that helps me avoid pitfalls like being overly narcissistic in my storytelling, or making myself out to be some kind of hero, or making my characters out to be unrealistic without flaws. So these are all things that I think about, and I'm kind of curious. Anyhow, my point is, it's just a weird process, and I'm still not quite sure. I kind of enjoy it, but it is just, there is a weird feeling of like sitting with a story for a long time and not really getting feedback from people outside of your own circle, and then going from that to the point where it's going to be in a market where random people are going to be reading it. I am really excited about that. It's a really cool prospect, but it's that waiting period where a lot of cartoonists I've talked to have described it as like feeling slightly crazy, like, I know it's weird, but it's like you're sitting at an art table for years. Sometimes maybe if you're really quick, for like a year. And you're just kind of hitting the pages, and you're dedicating all this time to making something somebody's going to read very quickly. Sorry, my allergies are going nuts. And you can start to get this feeling like you're going crazy, like you're creating this thing in a vacuum, and it can be very disassociating and very weird. And especially during the process of Jacobs, which was my first graphic novel that I ever made, like full graphic novel. It's just a really tense, weird, strange experience full of a lot of self-doubt. The second one, the self-doubt starts leaving a lot. I will say, like, working on my third right now, 2 Stories Book 2, I feel much more confident. I know the process a little better. I've also learned to just kind of trust it a lot more. I don't second guess quite as often. And I think that, but I guess my point is, I think inevitably there will be like weird second guessing, insecurities, things that come up as you're sitting with a piece of art alone for a very long period of time. And so it's an interesting thing. I don't know if I've quite pinned down how to navigate it properly, but I will say it's exciting and also horrifyingly frightening to put something new out that you've been sitting with for years. Anyhow, let me know how you guys as creatives deal with that, especially cartoonists. How do you deal with that weird juxtaposition of like not kowtowing to an audience, because then you're just pandering and making something that I don't think is going to last. But also like being beholden to your audience to the extent of like having the responsibility of telling a clear, solid story, right? Doing your job as a storyteller, entertaining or moving or saying something to other people. How do you deal with that balance? And then how do you deal with the balance of working on these things in isolation for so long, and then also after doing that, putting them out into the world? Do you guys feel trepidation about that? How do you navigate it? I'm curious to hear. Let me know in the comments. And yeah, that's basically going to do it. I don't have much today. I'm going to get to work. I'm going to continue to just kind of do this hardcore path of like just hitting the pages, drawing nonstop, and keeping positive, not letting self-doubt kind of interfere with productivity, and hopefully I'll be able to get you guys 2 Stories Book 2. Hopefully, I'm hoping by like next year. So this year, I'm gonna have Jacob's Apartment coming out May of 2022. So that's this May. So if you can pre-order to help make that successful, I'd appreciate it. There's a link down there. And then next year after that, I'm aiming to have 2 Stories Book 2 done. And that's a lot of stuff to do. And I will say there's another project that might also be on its way as well. That's another personal graphic novel project. So anyhow, that'll do it. So I'm Joshua Kemble. Make sure you're following me, subscribe, like, all that fun stuff, and hit the bell. Make sure you're following me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and I will see you guys on the next Vloggins. Goodbye.